As each month, and as a reminder to people, we do update our COVID data on our website. Every week, and then we'll briefly review it once a month as we start the meeting. For today's meeting, for people who were at our prep meeting, there was some discussion about DC Health joining us today. They're in the process of updating some guidance, and so they felt it would be much clearer if they make sure the guidance is finalized, and they will be ready to join us next month at our next community forum. And so this month, we will have a presentation regarding employment and supports available for that from 2 different staff within RSA. We'll also have a presentation regarding our contribution to cost of supports policy from DDA and CLOCMA staff, and a brief presentation from Donald Clark about our upcoming Tech Fest. So first off, in terms of the data, we are at 649 people who've been diagnosed with COVID. To date, this month, there have been 12 people supported by DDA who have contracted COVID. By provider type, by placement type, we've had 1 person in a correctional facility, 16 in host homes, 127 in intermediate care facilities, 1 in a mental health facility, 133 in natural homes, 2 in nursing homes, 7 in out-of-state placements, 53 in residential rehabilitation, and 309 in supported living. In terms of the major placement types, this reflects in intermediate care facilities, a little over 40% of people have contracted COVID. Of those who contracted COVID, we have had 32 in ICFs who have passed away, but only 13 of those are confirmed COVID deaths. In natural homes, the 133 reflect a little over 14% of people in natural homes. Of those, there have been 7 deaths, which is about 5%, but only 3 are confirmed. I'm sorry, 7 deaths and 5 are confirmed as COVID deaths, representing a little under 4% of people in natural homes who contracted COVID and died from COVID. In residential rehabilitation, 53 people, representing a little under 50% of people in residential rehabilitation. There have been 3 deaths and 2 are confirmed as COVID, representing about 4% of people. In supported living, about 32% of people, 309 people have contracted COVID, 16 confirmed COVID deaths, representing about 5%. So overall, of people supported by DDA, a little over 26% or 649 have contracted COVID. We have had 75 deaths, but there are 38 confirmed COVID deaths. Fortunately, of the 12 people this month who contracted COVID, none of them have required hospitalization. The last time that we had a person who required hospitalization was in May, when we had 2 people, and there are currently no people in who are hospitalized receiving COVID treatment. And then in terms of vaccinations, among the people supported by DDA, we're at 87% of people who have been vaccinated, 99% in host homes, 99.6% in ICFs, 78% in natural homes, 100% in residential rehabilitation, and 93% in supported living. Among people eligible for boosters, and we're tracking here just the first booster. It's 76% of people eligible for boosters have received it. Among providers, staff, this is the same, we update that every other week, so it's at 95% are vaccinated, and 66% who are eligible for a booster have received it. And among DDS staff, 98% are vaccinated, with 94% who are eligible for a booster having received it.
Andy?
Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask you, did you provide the setting breakdown for the 12 cases this month?
I did not, and I can. So there were 6 in supported living, 5 in natural homes, and 1 in a residential rehabilitation placement.
And Andy, this is Robin Shafford. Could you also tell us their vaccination status, please?
I can. But it's going to take me a second. And so what I will do is allow Donald to speak. And then I'll give you that information as soon as Donald finishes his brief discussion about our upcoming tech fest. Donald? Is Donald still with us?
He is still with us.
And he is on mute.
Give me 1 second, Director Reese, to try to reach it.
Okay, well, in that case, I can respond to Robin's question there. So of the people who contracted COVID in July, all of them had been vaccinated. However, 9 of the 12 were fully vaccinated, including current with any booster. 3 of them were eligible to receive a booster and have not done so. And of those, of those 3, 1 was asymptomatic, the other 2 did have symptoms. And as I said, of all of the people who contracted COVID this month, there were 6 of the 12 were asymptomatic and 6 had symptoms. None of them required inpatient treatment. So while we wait for Donald to resolve whatever it is going on, we could move on to Shasta. And she'll be supported by Roday and
Pamela Harmon.
And Pam Harmon to talk about contribution to cost of supports.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shasta Brown, the Deputy Director for Quality Assurance and Performance Management Administration. And as Andy has expressed, my co-presenters will be Pamela Harmon, Supervisory Medicaid Waiver Specialist, and Roday Bernadelle. She's the new Program Manager for Service Planning and Coordination. We will be presenting on the contribution to cost of residential supports. So as you can see, the District of Columbia law requires persons applying for or receiving certain residential supports to contribute to the cost of care. In 2016, the contribution of cost of support fund Amendment Act of 2016 was approved. And due to that approval of the act, the contribution to cost of residential supports policy and procedures were developed and implemented. The services that just the specific residential services that apply to the contribution to cost of care are residential rehabilitation, supported living, host home, and other locally funded residential support services. It's important for the team to know that during the intake procedure, when anybody has expressed interest in residential services, the community liaison will share a copy of the contribution to cost of residential supports fact sheet. They share that immediately during the intake so that anybody who is interested in residential services, they understand that they have to contribute towards their residential care and making sure that everyone is aware in advance. The effective date for the policy, and I'll just say that CTC policy and procedure moving forward, was October 1st, 2021. There were two groups of people that are affected by this policy. The first group are requiring for anyone who enters into our system after October 1, 2021, they have to begin paying on the first day of the month following the person's initial ISP towards their contribution to residential supports. That's anyone who transitioned into one of the residential settings that were on the previous slide. For those people who are already in services and they have not been paying or contributing towards their cost of residential services, they're supposed to start paying after October 1st. They were required to pay $100 the first month, and then it goes up into increments of $50 every year. So we have some people who are in our system who were not paying, and there was an agreement that because this policy was implemented, that those people will be grandfathered into slowly beginning to pay the full amount towards their contribution to residential supports. The team would have an ISP meeting for that person. During that ISP meeting, they will have 6 months to get themselves together to understand that they would start paying the first $100. Then after that, it would be $50 every year. It would increase by $50 every year. The reason why we have at the bottom that it will be heavily imposed come October 1, 2022 is because we haven't fully implemented the second portion of the contribution to cost of residential supports policy and procedure, which is the people who are not already paying. We haven't fully implemented the process of ensuring that they're paying $100. So come October 1, 2022, service coordination will be having those meetings discussing that process with people who are in this particular group and ensuring that the system reflects the payment that they will be required to pay, which I said initially is $100 and then $50 increments the preceding years.
Hi, Shasta, this is Pam. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I was on Teams with about 60 or 70 other people who are now joining the Zoom call. Just wanted to let you know that, quite a few people are going to be transitioning over. And I just transitioned over too. So I just wanted to let you all know I was here.
Okay, thank you. And I see a hand is raised. April?
Yes, I had a question regarding, let's just say, for example, someone that works who starts to provide the $100 contributing to their cost of care. Let's just say they started this year with the $50 increase preceding years. Can you inform if there's a cap associated with the max for the amount that they contribute to the cost of care with those incremental $50 being added per year?
So that max will be whatever the SSI maximum payment is for the years moving forward minus $100. Pam, offhand, do you remember what the maximum SSI amount is? I think it's 8.
It's in the next slide.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I was on with
It's
Pam.
$840.
Ahead.
It's $841. That's the maximum for SSI effective January 1, 2022.
Okay, yes. So whatever year, as they get closer and closer, it will be the max minus the $100. Did that answer your question, April?
It did, thank you.
Okay. All right. So when it comes to contributing to residential supports, we typically have 3 sets of people who are receiving services from us. And by that, we have one set where DDS is already the representative payee. So if DDS is the representative payee for the person's SSI or their SSDI benefits, that person is already contributing towards their costs of residential supports. And what DDS does is we ensure that that person receives their $100. So a check is mailed to the residential provider and they provide the person $100 for their personal allowance. And then we have another set of group of people who are particularly transitioning into residential services or already have residential services where they do not have a representative payee. So they're receiving their own Social Security or SSDI, or they may have a designated representative payee other than DDS. If that's the case, according to the policy that was effective October 1, the provider is responsible for collecting the payment from the person or their representative payee. And once the team has that meeting to discuss the amount that the person will be paying, the date that they will be paying that monies, and the provider is responsible for moving forward to ensure that they receive those monies. But DDS will also reduce the provider's payment by the contribution amount that the person is going to pay. So it's very important that if providers have not revised their policies and procedures and have not developed some type of process, fact sheet of how they're going to implement that process with people as they transition into their organizations, it's very important that you have some type of process established for how you are going to collect these monies from people and have an accounting of the money that's being paid for the contribution to residential supports. I see another hand raised. Sam Crane.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to get off mute. I'm concerned. So if a person is contributing, that means they're basically only having $100 left over from their SSI for like every payment other than housing?
Yes, but please be mindful that DDS pays for housing, electricity, utilities, provide clothing allowance, as well as food, cable, internet.
Okay, so they would still have a separate pot of money for clothing and food?
But yes,
Okay.
yes,
And what about phone?
that's included. Not
Okay,
a personal phone, not a personal phone if you have your own,
Okay.
cell
Like a cell phone.
Yes, but communication
Okay.
is included. Yes. Okay. I'm going to go to the next slide. Are there any questions in the chat that I need to ask before I move forward? Answer rather.
There,
Okay.
Okay, for persons who are new to residential supports, the required contribution to cost is discussed during the initial ISP meeting or the team meeting. The person or their representative payee, if it's someone other than DDS, it could be the person themselves or a family member, or they might have a guardian that's their rep payee or a conservator. So that person is required to begin making monthly payments on the first day of the month following the approval of the initial or amended ISP. The service coordinator will document the cost of the contribution amount in the service funding authorization, and also document that the rep payee has agreed to make payments directly to the provider.
You're on mute, Pam.
so when calculating the contribution to cost of care, The amount will be based on evidence of a person's income and assets. Income and assets can include, but are not limited to, wages, earned wages, checking and savings account balances, Social Security income, Social Security disability income, benefits from Veterans Administration, income from pension, earned income, gambling proceeds, damage awards, inheritance, etc., and other statutory benefits. And so relevant financial documentation will be reviewed by the team at the ISP meeting at least annually, or when a person's income situation changes. So if a person becomes employed in the middle of the ISP year, at that time, the documentation will be reviewed and it will be reported. So contribution to cost based on earned as well as unearned income. Unearned income is federal supplemental security income, the SSI, and Social Security disability insurance benefits. They are both used to pay toward the contribution to care. So a person whose income is SSI or SSDI or any other statutory benefits that I spoke of on the previous slide, and they reside in host home or residential setting, they keep $100 a month for their personal needs allowance and shall contribute the remainder to cost of residential supports. So in the example below, the current maximum monthly SSI payment minus the $100 a month personal needs allowance as of January of 2022, the amount is $841 minus the $100 allowance to equal $741 contribution to cost of residential supports. So a person in terms of earned income, if they have earned wages such as employment, it must be used to the contribution to cost of residential supports. And this should be equivalent to the amount of the maximum amount of SSI or SSDI and other statutory benefits that have been reduced due to the earned income. So a person who is employed in such a way that they are not eligible for statutory benefits shall have their monthly contribution to residential supports calculated using a similar formula.
So with this page, this particular slide is speaking of the non-payment. Our policy and our procedures specifically discuss the steps that the provider should take for people who have agreed to make their monthly payments directly to the provider if they do not receive the funds. So initially, they should be reaching out to DDS within 5 calendar days of the person not paying the funds. And they should also schedule an interview with the person for non-payment. So that means, have a discussion with them to find out why they weren't able to pay. They might be able to make arrangements to say, I'll pay you in 2 weeks or something. There needs to be that discussion with the person or their designated representative payee, but DDS needs to know as soon as possible, and that's within the 5 calendar days. It's not something that we want to lag on for a long period of time. Then after you have the discussion with the person, if this is something that continues, then the provider should send a notice to the person detailing the amount owed and request payment. The provider can do that for up to 3 times, but you also need to include DDS in those communications that you are having with the person. If the person continues to not pay, or their representative payee continues to refuse to pay, the provider has the ability to go ahead and start the discharge conversation with the person, as well as their designated representative payee.
He was being mean.
I'm sorry, can someone,
So who was all in the interview?
thank you. Okay. So if that person does not pay or their representative payee is not paying, the provider is able to have the discussion about possible discharge, and then also share those communications. Sorry, somehow I was muted, then I unmuted. Okay, so they will also need to share those communications with DDS, and it's not a situation where DDS will want the provider to be in arrear. We will work with the provider to discuss how we can make them whole and ensuring that they receive the back payment. But also the provider can have discussions about maybe if there are some things that they're able to remove from the budget for the person to offset the amount that has not been paid. But ultimately, if over time it continues where they're not paying the provider, then there can also, as I indicated, be discussion about the provider discharging a person, but also DDS discharging a person from services. But everyone has due process if it escalates to that level. The importance is that the provider communicates as soon as possible.
As part of the annual ISP process, the service coordinator will review the person's financial documentation and recalculate the required contribution if necessary. The person can make a request for a recalculation anytime there is a change in their income or their benefits, so they don't have to wait for the annual ISP. So as soon as you know about any changes, definitely report them, and the person can request a recalculation. So adjustments to the required contribution will be reflected in the person's IFP. That's their individual financial plan. That's also part of the ISP. And it also will be reflected in the budget in MCIS, as well as the provider's purchase orders. The person or their provider should always continue to notify DDS of any significant income changes that may affect the person's public benefits.
Okay, and QACMA conducts annual reviews. So during those reviews, they will select a sample of people to review their documentation. The documents include all funds collected by the service provider, the handling and deposit of the person funds into any account, and the justification and documentation for the use of the funds. Before I go to the next slide, I see that Carol has her hand up. Carol?
Right. Sorry, I wasn't hearing very well there for a second. Yeah, it kind of went really quickly past earned income, but I just wanted to ask you to clarify what my understanding is, which is that if you have some earned income, but not to the extent that it reduces your government benefits, you can keep that earned income, correct?
Yes. I'm not clear. Yes. I mean, I don't know of too many situations where a person has earned income where it might not reduce their SSI. But yes, if their SSI is going to remain the same amount, then they will continue to pay for this year, for example, the 741.
Okay, your SSI can remain intact up to quite a level of earned income.
Okay.
Not if you're working full-time, but if you're working like a few hours, yeah, you certainly can, yeah, it doesn't reduce your SSI until you've earned something like 16 or 20 grand a year or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I see the hand is raised by April and then Nicole.
Yeah, so I just wanted to bring to your attention that there are some questions that are in the chat that were asked. The first one, someone asked, what does discharge of a person mean and where do they go?
So when we speak of discharge, currently in our waiver rules, any provider that feels that they're unable to support a person or it has the ability to discharge a person from their program because they think they can't support them, the provider would have to give at least 30 days notice in writing to discharge the person from their specific program. Just because a person is discharged from one organization doesn't mean that they wouldn't be able to be referred possibly to another organization. But it's important to know that specific to this concern, if a person is going to be consistent with failing to pay or contribute towards their costs for residential support, then that is a requirement to be able to receive residential services through the district government, which is why we said ultimately, if that continues, then we can also look at discharging the person possibly from the waiver. Or at minimum residential supports, because it is a requirement that people contribute towards their cost of care. Nicole, I'm sorry.
There was another. Yeah, there was one more question in the chat. It's not from me, but I'm just reading the questions in the chat. The other question in the chat was from Ian. He asked, so if a person gets an SSDI payment, they must use all of that SSDI towards CTC, less the $100 they might be getting from SSI, essentially writing a check directly to the provider. Are you certain this is the practice in other states? Social Security disability insurance pays benefits to the beneficiary and certain members of the family if they are insured, meaning that they or family member work long enough and paid Social Security taxes.
So currently what's in our policy and procedure is that the person would have to pay the full amount of the SSDI minus the $100.
Those are all the questions in the chat.
Okay. Nicole?
Hi, Shasta. Good afternoon, everyone. My question was, when you were speaking of when a person has continuously failed to pay and a provider could reduce the cost in other areas, could you just give specific areas? Like, I guess for me, it came up like, were you speaking of like clothing allotment money to go towards what they owe the provider, or is there another cost that we can reduce in other areas to be able to obtain that money that was lost?
Yes, so that would be the clothing allowance. It may be, let's say, so there are certain things that we might consider a luxury. Cable is not required. So yes, those are examples of things that could possibly be reduced, or not paid specifically to the person wouldn't receive the clothing allowance, and it would offset the cost that the provider is short.
Okay, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So this next slide basically speaks to the references. It has a copy of the specific regulation, as well as give access to the face sheet that is shared with people who express interest in residential supports. And it also, these are the links to our policy and our procedure for the contribution to cost of residential supports. This last slide lets you know who to contact if you have specific questions. So at this point in time, I am going to open it up for questions. You can unmute yourself or you can put the question in the chat.
Hi, this is Allison White. I'm gonna unmute just because I think this question is more complicated than what I can put in writing, but is there any if somebody has additional kind of personal costs, anything like medical co-pays or things that they're paying for out of pocket, can that $100 be can that affect the formula that people ultimately have to pay? So like if somebody's getting $800 in SSI, but they have out-of-pocket costs for personal expenses, like a car payment, for example, can that be factored into whatever they ultimately have to pay back for cost of care. I thought at one point in the policy, there were allowances for things like that for individual people's circumstances about additional costs that they might have on a monthly basis. And then they didn't have to turn over the whole like $700. It could be, you know, 800, and let's say their car payment is $200 a month. Then they could keep $300, the $100 plus whatever they need for that car payment. That's just an example. Are there allowances for that in the current policy?
So no, not that particular example. A car payment is not something where, you know, the contribution of costs to residential supports could be decreased. But yes, there are examples, like for example, if there's a parent who has to pay childcare, and they need that additional money to be able to pay the childcare, that is something where you can have a recalculation of your benefits. If your benefits decrease, let's say you lose your job and your SSI is not aware of that change, and your SSI benefits have not increased to offset the difference, then you may have a recalculation. If you have out of pocket, as you said, medical expenses that you need to pay, that yes, would be a reason why we would say we understand that there needs to be a recalculation, but not a car payment. But yes, there are reasons why you may be able to have a recalculation.
Along those lines, may I ask a question?
Yes.
So I'm thinking of, because I also provide parenting supports. So I'm thinking of a person in particular that I have in mind who may not be receiving SSI. However, she receives TANF. However, that money is received to support her child and or children. So for someone that's receiving TANF, but not SSI, and TANF is their source of income, what is the expectation?
TANF is their only source of income, and TANF is really for the child. So I'm not really clear. We would not take away benefits for the children because DDS only supports the people who are receiving services from DDS. We do not support children. So that is a benefit that is specific for the child. What we would do though is encourage and support the person to apply for other benefits or apply to receive services through RSA to support them with receiving employment, but we would not take the TANF benefits because that's specifically for the children.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Shasta, I have a question because now, you know, people are contributing to their cost of care. If a person of support has been requesting to have a single occupancy who doesn't necessarily qualify based off of behavioral or medical needs, but they have a significant amount of income that they're saying they would pay whatever the difference is DDS now open to them offsetting their own cost of care for a single occupancy apartment versus having a roommate?
We're not at that point right now. We do have a housing choice policy that's in draft where we have certain scenarios, such as the scenario that you just discussed as part of the housing choice policy, but we're revising that policy. Once that policy is in almost its final draft form, of course, any policy that DDS develops, we will present to the stakeholders for feedback. But at this point in time, no, that's something that we want to fully address in our policy, what the options are outside of the current practices that we have in place.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay. All right, so
Shasta,
yes.
someone had previously, I know since you're sharing your screen, you can't see them. Someone had been reading you the chat. So I want to make sure we get caught up with some of the notes that people have in the chat. I will say, based on a lot of the notes I'm reading, I'm thinking that we might want to have someone who does benefits counseling come to one of our sessions. So first of all, Rebecca Salon shared that SSI is reduced by $1 of every $2 of earned income after the first $65 that a person earns. Taking away some of the luxury items could affect the roommate, like cable. I don't know if you have a response to that comment.
No, and I do hear that concern, which is why the clothing allowance is something that's specific to a person. It's not something that is shared amongst the team, the house. So it's really a conversation that would need to be had with the provider. That's not the first thing that we will go to. The first option would really be having a discussion with the person, with DDS, see if there's a reason that maybe their contribution to costs needs to be recalculated. We don't want to just immediately start looking at, well, how can we reduce the cost for the provider? So, or take away from the person so that the provider can be receiving what it is that the person is supposed to pay. The first thing is having that conversation, find out what's going on, see if there's a recalculation that needs to be done. Also, informing DDS, so if for some reason we need to adjust the local fund that's being paid to the provider, we can do that. But what we can't accept is just that consecutive non-payment. That's when the other options come into play, and we may have to discuss possible discharge. But we want to start with the first route, communicating, finding what's going on. Do we need to do a recalculation for the person? Can they work out some type of payment plan? And if they are amenable and adhering to the payment plan, then we don't have to go to the other options.
So the next question, why does the district become the de facto beneficiary of SSDI coverage? If you don't mind, I'll respond to that, which is people's SSDI is used to pay the cost of their residential supports, and we wouldn't charge them more than the cost of residential support. So the funds are being used to pay the person's costs, their expenses, which is what everyone who receives SSDI uses their SSDI for. I also am noticing you're no longer sharing. Does that mean you're done with your PowerPoint?
Yes.
Because even though we have fewer people than we had planned for, I'm also noticing the time. And we still have Anjali and Ifioma who are to present. As I said, I do think that it would be very helpful to have someone, and we can talk about this at our planning meeting, have someone talk about benefits counseling and what happens. We're not going to talk about that when we talk about employment today, but what happens in terms of earnings when a person goes to work.
All right, and if you have any questions for any of us, I can put my email address in the chat, and I'm available to answer any questions.
There is one question here, I'm going to say it and then we'll move on because it's sort of for future. Because I've heard this question, actually it was raised first in Project Action. And I've seen a couple of people raise the question now about the fact that the $100 personal needs allowance has not gone up in quite some time. And it's a provision in our regulation. One of the things I think we need to look at is it a limitation, or is it the floor or the ceiling? And it is something that perhaps needs to be discussed. Well, I think may need to be discussed further. And it would have a significant impact because the funds that would then additional funds going to the person means less funds coming to the agency to pay the cost of residential supports. So it would have budget implications, and it is a discussion that we need to have during the budget development process. But several people have raised it. It is certainly a reasonable question that went up to $100, I think 14 years ago. And certainly there's been inflation since then. So next up.
Oh, Andy, is it just possible just to mention though that DDS does get a COLA in what your payment is because every year the SSI level goes up. So since there's a COLA on the SSI, you know, DDS, the agency, is getting a COLA increase. It's only the personal needs allowance that does not get a COLA increase.
That is accurate. And that pays about 1/3 of the cost that we pay for residential supports. It's roughly 1/3. We fund residential supports through other earnings that the agency gets for Medicaid earnings, through local funds, and then through what's called special purpose revenue, which is the money that people pay. So folks who pay us are paying about 1/3 of the cost. So it is true that, you know, there's a COLA each year and that's going up some. It's nowhere near what we're paying for residential supports. And it is an issue that we would discuss, as I said, during budget development, and should discuss during budget development. Because the cost of, you know, what people pay for in personal needs has certainly gone up in the last 14 years. So next up, we have Anjali Ngugan, who will be talking. She'll do an overview of. Yes.
I just wanted to let you know that Donald Clark is back with us.
Good for him. So next up, we have Anjali. Thank you. Next up, we have Anjali. And she will provide a brief presentation about RSA. And it may well be, I'm going to say, I'm sorry to Ephioma, because I'm looking, well, we'll see how things go. I'm looking, it's now 12:53. We will see how it goes. We still want to hear Donald's brief presentation about the Tech Fest. And then we'll see, we may be scheduling Ephioma to return next month. Anjali, it's all yours.
Thank you, Andy. Hi, everyone. My name is Anjali McGugan. I am, for those that don't know me, I am one of the VR or supervisory VR specialists for the Rehabilitation Services Administration. I'm pretty much new here in presenting, but I've been with the agency for a little under 7 years. And so I'm happy to be here, just giving you all a brief presentation of RSA services. Okay. So for those who are not familiar with vocational rehabilitation services, or the VR services as we call it, we are a program underneath the Rehabilitation Services Administration, where we work to rehabilitate individuals with disabilities, where we help to prepare for, secure, gain, retain, and assist individuals in advancing in their employment. We do believe that all individuals with disabilities do have the ability to work, and not only work, the important piece is that we believe that they're able to work and be integrated and work in a competitive setting, workplace, and also be included in society. So VR services, we also help to reduce and or remove any barriers that a disability or other psychosocial occurrences can take, but we help to reduce those barriers to employment. Some of the benefits that we do provide is that, of course, our agency is person-centered. So our counselors really take the time to really listen to our clients and help them to really meet them on their level, and to understand from their point of view what's happening, and also to be able to collect and understand what it is that they want to do based on, you know, their personal preference. We also specialize in preparing individuals for long-term employment. That is what our goal is. We definitely don't want to place individuals, you know, where it may only be successful for a couple weeks, a couple days. We are looking for places where individuals can, maintain and be there for an extended amount of time. And we also provide support with helping one to maintain their employment and or their career. I think that's very important now, and the atmosphere that we're living in, where things are kind of up and down with employment. So if we have individuals that come in and require any type of services because they may be in fear of losing their job based on maybe they need a particular skill to advance them in their career, and we're able to assist with that. One thing that I did want to bring to your attention, and sometimes it can be a little tricky navigating the process of VR services and how the agency orders our steps. But if there's any individuals who are interested, or if you know of someone that may be interested, our referral for general VR and other services is located on our website. The first step in applying for services is to complete the referral form. That referral form then goes directly to our intake team, where they will review the form, and within 2 business days, the individual who has made that referral should be contacted by our referral team and linked to a counselor. When an individual is linked with a counselor, the individual will be invited to come in. We also do virtual intakes as well, but there will be access, given to the client if it's a virtual intake. But the individual does have an option on whether or not they'd like to do virtual or in person. And at that time, the individual will have an opportunity to meet with the vocational rehabilitation specialist, where they will talk about their goals. It's a brief introduction. There is some slight paperwork that will be completed during that appointment. And at that time, it's just kind of more of an introduction to the services. After this step is complete, the counselor, the VR specialist, will take the information gained. They will also take proof of documentation or proof of disability in account, and they will review that information. This part of the process can take up to 60 days because sometimes it does take longer to get documentation from doctors if the client does not bring that piece of the puzzle with them. If we have the documentation that documents their disability, we're able to move through this process a lot quicker. But if not, we do allow up to 60 days to get to this process. Once an individual has been determined eligible for services, they will be notified in writing through a letter that is sent to them. And then we move on to the next piece, which is developing a plan, an individualized plan for employment. In this step, we really focus on the clients, what their wants are. We look at what their goals are, what their interests. We take into account their aptitude, their abilities, and then we give them all of their options so that they are able to make an informed choice. The IPE I like to call is pretty much a roadmap where we have identified a career goal. So if an individual wants to work as a cashier, that would be their vocational goal. And then we kind of take it step by step to try and figure out what does it take and what will the client need in order to reach that goal. So we talk about services and supports that an individual would need in order to be successful in that position. The next step is that we start to actively search for employment. We prepare for employment. And sometimes this could include assessments. Maybe an individual might need assessments to determine if there are any assistive technology items that they may need. We also may look at if they need assistance. Maybe they have interest in working, but maybe they have not had an opportunity to get to the point, and they may need some employment readiness skills. So in that session, we would talk about, we have providers who provide, and we can also do it as VR specialists, but we would work on skills needed in order to be ready to actually start seeking employment. If an individual is already ready for employment, then we go to the next step and we actually sit down with them, and either a provider will or our counselors will, and they will start preparing them to search for employment. We build resumes, we work on mock interviewing skills, and then we essentially hope that the individual will be ready to gain employment. And that kind of blended in step 4 and 5. But the next step would be, of course, to search for employment. Once an individual obtains employment, we do monitor their case for 90 days to ensure that they're stable and that they do have the items needed to maintain employment. So it's not okay, you have a job, great, and then we send them on their way. No, we actually check in with them, make sure that they're getting paid, that they understand what their paycheck is, so that they can monitor that on their own. And so we do all those steps with the intention of that they will find part-time or full-time employment, depending on what the individual is looking for. Some examples of the services that we do provide, and that is a part of the individualized plan for employment, is we always provide career guidance and counseling. That's a huge piece. That is what the counselors have in their tool bag and what they should be using frequently, but they help kind of guide clients in trying to maybe sometimes figure out what it is that they want to do. Also, career guidance is needed too in some cases where clients may have difficult situations that may come up on the job, and they may need additional guidance on how to work through those processes. We also have services that include assessments, so we can assess and complete psychological evaluations, vocational evaluations, and vocational evaluations are typically used for individuals who maybe have an interest to work, but they don't really have an idea of what they like to do. They're unsure if they like to work with people or if they like to use their hands. So a vocational assessment is something that can kind of guide us to what matches the client, and look at what skills and abilities the client actually has. We also provide job coaching, job development, and job placement services. We have team members who can help us recommend assistive technology that might be useful for individuals trying to obtain employment. We do provide transportation, and this is mainly for people who may need to come and see us to do job searches, or they might, back in the day when we did a lot of job searches kind of door to door, versus as getting on the computer as some people do now to look for jobs, but the transportation piece would allow us to get a client from, they're doing door-to-door searches. And then also we recognize that when individuals find employment, that they may not necessarily have the means to get to their place of employment at that time. So we do provide transportation short-term, but we do support them in ensuring that they can get to work once we find employment. In some cases, we can provide financial support for work-related post-secondary education in our training. And that is, it's case-by-case basis, but generally speaking, if an individual requires training or maybe a certification to maintain employment, that's an instance where we would be able to, in some cases, provide that financial support. I briefly touched on the individual plan for employment. And again, that's just what I would call like the roadmap that gets us to the point of an individual obtaining their vocational goal. And Andy kind of touched briefly on benefits counseling, but another service that we do provide is referrals to benefits counseling for those who may receive Social Security, disability, or insurance, so that they know that how that may affect their benefits. We do have some clients who want to work but also be able to maintain their benefits, and then we have clients who they prefer to work, and if their benefits are terminated, they're in a place where that's okay. And so before clients make those decisions, we do offer benefits counseling so that they have more of a informed opportunity and they can decide how they would like to proceed, given their information and how earning money would affect them. Some of the subgroups served by RSA, underneath our umbrella, we have little groups that we work in, or units. And so the main unit, or the main piece, which if you've ever came to DDS, well, you wouldn't know, but they all kind of sit together, but it is what we would call general VR. And general VR houses our sensory and vision, or sensory unit, which includes where we service individuals who have sensory losses, such as vision loss or hearing loss. Our general unit also houses the Randolph-Sheppard supported employment and our independent living services. But a client that would fall into our general services would be individuals that may have physical disabilities, mental health, and more of our kind of adult population. Also, again, underneath general would also include our vision and our hearing, our individuals with vision and hearing losses. Another unit, of course, is our sensory unit, and that includes the vision and individuals with vision and hearing losses, but it also houses our independent living services and our Randolph-Sheppard program. The other entity, and that's a bigger part of our organization, is we also serve youth, we also have youth in transition services. And that serves our young adults ages 14 to 22. And we provide a lot of programming for those that are in youth. Our counselors that work in that unit, they're out typically outside of the summer months, but they're usually in the schools working one-on-one or in groups with our youth, providing pre-employment transition services, which that service is, again, it's a lot that's included, and I have a very short amount of time, but it's a service that prepares youth with finding what is to come after high school, and helping them kind of bridge that gap between leaving high school and going on to what's next, whether that's finding employment or in some cases attending college. So we kind of fill in those gaps. And we provide employment readiness skills, career searching, and the list goes on. We have activities, and now we're kind of opening up. So we do have face-to-face activities in the building now, and we just had a welcome back night for college students on Wednesday. So our youth in transition, our transition unit is very active with the students. So if you have any students that may fit that and you're interested in that, I can provide my information in the contact line, and I'd be happy to share that so you could learn more information about our youth and transition unit. We do also house the Randolph-Sheppard program, where we recruit, train, and license and place individuals who have vision loss, and we assist them with operating or learning how to successfully operate vending machines, or not necessarily vending machines, but vending opportunities in some of our facilities. The facilities are typically located like in federal buildings and on other properties. Again, we also have the supported employment subgroup that we provide services to, and this is usually for those that have more of the significant disabilities. We work in this program in conjunction with DDA, and we help individuals find competitive and integrated employment, but the bigger piece is that we provide short-term services for individuals who require ongoing supports. And some of those supports include job coaching. And then lastly, the last subgroup is independent living services. And this group kind of assists individuals with varying disabilities live independently in the community. In this category, we do partner with the DC Center for Independent Living, also known as DC SEAL. And while working with these group of people, we provide services such as advocacy, IL skills or independent living skills. We also, and when I mean independent living skills, in some cases, if we're working with older blind, maybe they might need some additional supports as they navigate, living in a life that does have vision loss. Some of the, or what it takes are just our eligibility requirements. We, of course, service people that do have disabilities. So we do need documented, the individual does have to have documented proof that they do have a disability. The documented disability that they present, it must show that there is a barrier or an impediment to employment. And that an individual must show that they will benefit from VR services and becoming gainfully employed. And as previously mentioned on a few slides before this, in order to apply, the first step would be to visit our website or DDS's website. You would want to search for services, and through that you can look for VR services. And then it'll say how to apply for services. And then there is a link there that will take you directly to our application. Please note that this application is typically for general VR. And so if you're a student interested, or you have a student that may be interested in transition services, I will put my information in the chat so that you can reach out to me directly, and I can put you in contact with the transition unit who can help you navigate through that. And lastly, again, this is our points of contact, but mainly this is the point of contact for the intake unit or our intake. So if you are making a referral and maybe you haven't been contacted, or you need to know more about that process, these are the individuals that you would want to reach out to. Mr. Mark Augusta, he is the DDS and intake supervisor, intake and outreach supervisor, and he will definitely, he's very knowledgeable, will definitely be able to provide you on any guidance. And I thank you for your time. Please let me know if you have any questions. Again, I will drop my contact information in the chat, and I'll be happy to follow up with anyone who has or needs any additional support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Anjali. I just want to quickly go through the notes that are here in the chat. Some people supported are having difficulty obtaining new ID cards if they don't have original documents in terms of their birth certificate, social security card, etc., that is required for a renewal. No one can get a job with an expired ID. Any suggestions? I would just say work with your service coordinator and your team on the issue of an ID. And renewing an ID, if you have a real ID, doesn't require any of those documents. It can be done it's one of the services that's done on the computer. I know in DC, this is true at any rate. I seem hard to hear, Andy. Is it hard to hear me?
You seem very far away from your speaker. I had to turn the volume way up to capture your voice again.
Because nothing has changed, because I have to go all the way over there and change the volume. So I'll try and talk as loud as I can.
It's better now.
Yeah, okay. I'll use the voice I use in my office when the people around me complain. And then I know that Carol had raised the question, and I know it was responded to in the chat. I just want to make sure other people are aware. Carol raised a question about when you're working with someone who already gets DDA supports, can and does the RSA counselor do what they can to collect information, introductory information, et cetera. And I will just use that as an introduction to Ethioma. So Ethioma is going to do a presentation about our supportive employment services, which is a coordination that we have both with Department of Behavioral Health and with DDA. And she can respond to the question about how we coordinate between DDA and RSA, because many of the steps that Anjali outlined, she's talking about a person who walks through the door. When we have a person who's been supported by DDA, we generally have everything we need to complete an application, determine eligibility, and move toward an IPE right here in the office. So if Ethioma is available.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Director Reeves. I am available, but I was actually waiting to have a break between Anjali's presentation and to make a comment before exiting the meeting. I had wanted to say that I agree with your initial proposal that I present next time, because I have, I'm part of an interview panel. The candidate is already there and they moved it by a few minutes, just waiting for me to join. Yeah.
I also think that we have only 13 minutes remaining, and I've seen your presentation and it's a lot of information. And I know that people supported by DDA, one of the first questions I hear from so many people is about getting a job. And so I don't want to cut you short. And so that will be great. We can do that. I'm hoping next month. And so perhaps now Donald could talk about the Tech Fest. Now you can talk slowly, Donald.
So thank you so much. I'll be leaving now, so.
Thank you. And we look forward to sharing your presentation with everyone next time.
Thank you, sir. Bye, everyone.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Donald here. Just wanted to drop in and make an announcement again, piggybacking off of our last provider and community forum, to announce to everyone to please come join us August the 16th. We will have our Tech Fest Summit. This is a great opportunity for everyone in our community to come out and hear from several leaders from the tech world as far as solutions. And in addition to that, also touch, feel, and play with tech. Right now, we are almost reaching our goal of having 20 different tech exhibitors there with you, giving you the opportunity to engage with them and see all the various tech solutions that are making an impact to promoting independence for people with disabilities. I also want to let you know, when you do register for this event, attendees can register to participate in Spirit Club's fitness class. We will have 2 slots available for people to register for that as well. Most importantly, to providers, definitely share this information with people that you support. I have set up the registration so that you can register multiple people on their behalf if they are interested in attending to attend the event in person. In addition to that, we are also offering this experience, part of this experience virtually, in addition to in person. However, I do want to share the disclaimer that for people that are attending virtually, they would not be able to experience the exhibitors. They would experience the main show, which is where we'll hear from a lot of tech leaders and their applications of tech solutions. However, in the future, we will actually host each exhibitor's recording online at a later date. So come out, we hope to see you. Based on your turnout, we're hoping to make this an annual event, but it's very important we have a strong turnout for this, and can't wait to see you all. Thank you. Have a great weekend. I'll drop the link to the flyer in the chat.
Also, Donna, while you're here, if you want to let some of the providers know about the Tech Tutor Labs we're hosting next week, they should have received the email blast about that.
Oh, great. Thank you, Charlisa. Yes, Tech Tutor Lab. We did our test round with the Tech Tutor Lab, which is basically an opportunity for small classroom settings to receive tech basics from Octo Tech Together team. That is a resource that's in the community that I think a lot of people are not taking advantage of. And we want to bring that resource to the community. So we've had previous sessions in March, and now we are ending our four-part series sessions in July. We have 2 last dates available for people to register. This focuses on the people we support, just getting comfortable with tech, learning the basics. So those dates are July the 25th and the 28th. Both at 2 to 3 p.m. We have sent out an email blast as Charlisa shared, so it should be in your email with the link to register as well.
Thank you. And one other thing, many people may have gotten this, and it was in our notices at the beginning of today's meeting. The DC Assistive Technology Program has the Smart Home exhibit. It's going on right now, actually. It's today and tomorrow from 11 to 3 at the Martin Luther King Library. And it's kind of the same concept, learning about smart home devices that can assist with independence for people in their home. That is, as I said, today from 11 to 3 and tomorrow from 11 to 3 at Martin Luther King Memorial Library. And I also wanted to note, regarding RSA, Sandy had put a note in the chat for people. If anyone has concerns about RSA services, Disability Rights DC's number is 202-547-0198, extension 135. Disability Rights DC operates the Client Assistance Program, which is a federally funded advocacy program for people receiving VR services. So if you have any, if you're receiving services or you wanted to receive services and have any challenge, you can of course call us, but you can also call the Client Assistance Program. Someone has shared that they went to the Smart Home exhibit at the library this morning. They were very helpful. It was great to get to see the tech in action. They were hoping more providers would be there. So we have shared this. I hope that people will bring folks to go, and it's the same thing. Try things out and see how they work. I think I have gotten to all of the questions and comments. If I missed one, please just unmute yourself and share or ask your question. Okay, well, everyone have a great weekend. I'll actually be going tomorrow to after Project Action to the Smart Home exhibit. So hopefully I'll run into some of you there. Have a great weekend. Stay cool. It is going to be extremely warm all weekend. Have a great weekend, folks. Bye.